Hey guys, welcome back to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. I'm Pierre, and with me is Nick, and this is the WPC Plus, where we take advanced stats you may not have even known existed, and we try to simplify them and break down what it actually means in fantasy. And we're going to start today with CSW, which obviously stands for called strikes and whiffs. This is relatively new, and Nick, you were just telling me now available on Fangraphs. Of course, you know that being a Fangraphs writer as well as a Rotoballer contributor. Um, this is something that really we haven't used a whole lot until recently. This is something that's just caught on last couple of years. What's the quick dirty background on CSW?
Yeah, so invented by Alex Fast, who is, uh, you know, vice president over at Pitcher List with Nick Pollock. He's a producer at MLB. He does tremendous pitcher overlays. Generally, just a all around nice dude. I wrote for Pitcher List for a while. I got to know him a little bit, and yeah, I believe it was the FSWA Research Article of the Year in 2019, uh, and it is it's fairly simple. It's we talk about swinging strike all the time, and it's called strikes plus swinging strikes divided by the total number of swings, and check out the article. Like it's still it's evergreen article. You can search for it and find it, and he really breaks down like going through all of the math about why this is such an excellent predictive metric as far as strikeout rate goes, and it is everywhere now. Like you said, it's on Fangraphs now, on custom leaderboards, all the player cards everywhere across the site. It's on Baseball Savant, started using it last year as well. First on their Gamecast last year, which was pretty exciting to see, and then now it's a searchable thing you can do on the site, and it's they I've seen on Twitter a couple of times, and I've heard on the broadcast a couple of times, like broadcasters are just using it now in games, which is really awesome to hear. And Alex was actually on MLB Network on the just a few days ago, like just kind of being interviewed about it and breaking it down and talking about why it's important. So, yeah, it is a great, just not just for like strikeout rate, but just because when you have a good strikeout rate, good things tend to follow from that. So it's predictive for strikeout rate, but just it's a great, just nice general stat to look at to see how a pitcher is, like how the stuff is doing. Like just the ability to get called strikes, ability to get swinging strikes. Like sounds simple, but you do those two things and you're going to be very successful.
Yeah, it really isn't that complicated. It's what it sounds like, called strikes. Those are in whiffs. And so a lot of people look at just swinging strike rate, which is obviously also very important in and of itself. But the called strike, the ability to get the called strike, it's part of the whole dynamic, right? It's not just a swinging strike. You look at everything together, but a lot of people might say, well, just get to the bottom line. Look, it's fantasy. All I care about is how many strikeouts a guy gets. Why can't I just look at strikeout percentages and that's it? Well, strikeout rates, just like everything else, they fluctuate, right? Things change. They go up and down, and we have some guys from year to year, month to month, game to game. They go up and down, and so we're always looking for a way to predict what's going to happen next. That's kind of the point, what we do. So this is definitely something worth diving into. So thank you, Alex Fast, for coming up with that. And like you said, it's funny to see to his reaction now that he's a TV star. It kind of overwhelmed him. And best friends with David Cohen, apparently. That's what it seems like to me. So,
Yeah, he'd very much like that. Yeah.
all right, let's get into it. This is three up, three down, as we do each week. So we're going to talk about some risers and fallers in CSW. Of course, not within the season because, well, we're just not even a month into the season. So we're going to compare early CSW from last year. And let's start with a guy who is off the charts now in terms of strikeout rate. So pretty obvious he's doing well. That's Dustin May of the Dodgers. And it's funny, I remember, how's it go? I'm old enough to remember last year when Dustin May's strikeout rate wasn't high enough. And he had filthy stuff, right? We know he's got the heat, and he has the spin, but he just wasn't generating enough strikeouts. And I think that's changed now with his strikeout rate. That's in the 93rd percentile. And his CSW pretty much backs that up.
Yeah, man, I'm very high on Dustin May. That, like you said, he's got premium velocity. He had, heavy fastball use. He's like, imagine Lance Lynn with, uh, beautiful red locks. Four seam, sinker, cutter, premium velocity, pounds the zone with them, and then has a great curveball and has really put it all together this year. As we've already seen, he's got a, a 37% strikeout rate after a 17% strikeout rate last year. And I wrote about him on a couple weeks ago on the Fangraphs article that I did on seam shifted wake. And so he's made me look pretty smart in the past couple of weeks. So, we've talked about seam shifted wake before. It's just kind of, brief breakdown of, there's a new camera system for Statcast now, an optical based system that we used to be able to, uh, you know, work backwards from how much movement pitches got, and then figure out the spin axis. And now that we have the Hawkeye camera system for Statcast, we can actually see, observe what the spin axis is, and that revelation that there has been a difference between the observed spin axis that we're seeing this year and the kind of inferred ones from previous years is that side forces are coming into play on pitches, and these side forces can be manipulated according to how a pitcher can orientate the seams as they throw it, which sounds really difficult to do, keeping the seams in the right place as you're throwing, along with everything else that is difficult to do about pitching. But, when we think about it, pitchers have always been doing this. Like we anecdotally, we've heard stories forever about, pitchers constantly cycling through grips, playing with grips, and then finding, the, the grail of, I found something that works. Like, I used someone else's, I talked to this pitcher and he showed me his grip for his cutter, and then, just something started working. And so now it's like they've been doing this for a while, and now it's just that they can do it purposefully. And Dustin May is not the only Dodger to really seem to be manipulating seam shifted weight quite a bit. So, I don't think it's a coincidence. Like, he's not the only one, but man, he has the stuff that really pairs with it. And that cutter of his, like, the curveball is deadly and has really been on display more. But the cutter is the one I talked about. And as far as like pitch by pitch, because we're talking about like overall CSW increases, but I look a lot at just at pitch by pitch as well. And, looking at his cutter, it has a 45.2% CSW. It's the second highest among like all pitch types, and it's up from 27% last year. So an 18% gain on CSW on his cutter. And like, remember, that's called and swinging strikes, like getting strikes both ways. Like, that tends to lead to really good things. And especially with the cutter, it's called strikes hasn't went up that much. Like, the freight on this is being carried by, he has a 27.2% swinging strike rate on his cutter, up from 12.2% last year. Like, that is like, I said in the article I wrote that, I never been in on May. Like, I always just like, okay, he's got the ingredients, but until he starts unlocking that strikeout rate, like, I've talked ad nauseum about how, careful you have to be with low strikeout guys. And even with the premium velocity and seemingly good stuff, like, until that strikeout rate got unlocked, I didn't have as much interest in him. But man, I'm done with that. I said then in that article, it's like, I'm looking to acquire him in Dynasty, and I have acquired him. I'm still trying, but he's making it very expensive with as good as just he keeps doing. And I don't expect this for it to slow it down. Like I said, he's got a Lance Lynn pitch mix, except he has high 90s heat. So and plays on one of the best teams in baseball. So, don't have to worry about wins as much. Like fantasy commodity wise, I think May has a monster ceiling.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the window, as they say, to buy anywhere at reasonable range in Dynasty is definitely closed at this point.
I
You
got
know
him
what?
in one league.
Oh,
One like right before I wrote that article, I acquired him in one league, and every
wow.
other attempt has failed since then. So
Yeah, I want to kick myself when it comes to May because I kind of was in on him even late last year. Then in the preseason, like I figured the strikeouts would come, but then I didn't draft him basically anywhere because I didn't think he would have a spot in the rotation because they have too many
yeah,
pitchers, right? Like what's gonna happen with Gunslinger? Oh, of course he gets hurt. Well, what about Price? He's coming back. Well, then he goes to the bullpen, and so I should have just drafted him, but
yeah,
say la vie.
yeah. After his because he was getting drafted pretty high for a while, and then just the way the rotation was shaking up, just he didn't have it got announced that he was not going to start in the rotation, and his draft price just bottomed out. And yeah, like a dummy, I didn't I didn't buy low, so
Oh well.
trying to catch up now.
Oh well, at least we know we can say that the CSW thing there's something to it. Looking good. Now here's an interesting case. Let's go to pitcher number 2. Our riser for CSW, but a faller in strikeout rate. So we'll try to figure out how that happens. The enigmatic Matthew Boyd of Detroit, who you either love, hate, or both simultaneously. I pretty much have just sworn away from him. I don't have him anywhere, especially after last year. Known to be a ratio wrecker right now. Well, he's killing you if you didn't pick him. He has a 182 ERA, 0.84 whip, but he only has 22 strikeouts in 34 innings, and yet his CSW has gone up quite a bit. So, what's going on there?
I'm a known Matt Boyd lover, and I can't. I told myself going into this year I was going to give him up, and I couldn't because I just running my, just his boring projections. Like I wasn't, just not just myself, but other like public projection systems, like running him through the values. Like his value wasn't that bad for where his draft price had dropped so much because he had, he was, going after pick 300, like, 280 to 320 range. And I got sucked in again. So I actually have him on a number of teams, which is nice that I'm finally after a few years, I'm finally like reaping the benefits of,
Validated.
some Matt Boyd value. He's using the Fangraphs auction calculator for 12 team leagues, just standard settings. He's the number 18 starting pitcher. That's we were just talking about how good May's been. May's the number 32 starting pitcher right now, but that like rankings on starting pitching this early is kind of funky because just one more start like can jump you up so much. But that just kind of tells you about like how good Matt Boyd has been though. And like I said, 182 ERA, not too shabby. I mean, 326 xERA. So we'll see, but still like a 296 FIP. So it's like he hasn't been as good as a 182 ERA, but he's still been very, very good. Well, like you said, strikeouts bottomed out. We all got excited about Matt Boyd because he had a 30% strikeout rate in 2019, kind of unlocked the slider. And we're like, all right, all he's got to do is get rid of that. He had some really bad like home run luck in the second half. Like, just got to get rid of that. He's gonna be a monster. And then he came back last year and still gave up the home runs and didn't even have the strikeout rate, 22%. And then this year, he's finally good, and his strikeout rate is 17%. So he's being good in the exact opposite way that we were hoping he'd be good last year, because you were kind of hoping to eat a mediocre ERA last year, but just piles of strikeouts. And so yeah, his CSW has increased 3.4 points, but his K rate down again, 14% 2019 when he was really good, 12.5% last year, 9.1% this year. So he's pumping it in the zone a lot more. He's getting a little more, his chase rate's up by like 3 points, but not getting they're not, he's hits into contact a little bit more, and it's working right now. I don't know if it's going to continue working, but I'm gonna keep writing it. But man, a 17% K rate is pretty tough to get behind.
Yeah, well, look, for a last round pick, basically what he was. I mean, yeah, any benefit you get, you're loving it. But I actually put out an article. If you're listening to this now, it's probably already up on RotoBaller. The difference between good in fantasy and good in reality, and so he's been really good. Great for the Tigers. But if the Ks aren't there, that's really not doing a whole lot for you. Sure, he's helping your ratios. One bad start, and then that's gone too, right? So it's a very thin line there between being good and not so much anymore. So so far so good in terms of how he's performing, but definitely something worth keeping an eye on. It's just weird that again the CSW has gone up and yet he's just not getting the strikeouts. We know he is capable because he kind of did it once, right? But yeah, with Matt Boyd, it's just you really never know what you're getting, which is what makes him so much fun to have in fantasy. And then
Yeah, looking.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to move on to another guy, but go ahead and finish.
Yeah, let's move on. You don't want me to just keep rambling on about Matt Boyd. I was just gonna say to once again going down to the pitch by pitch level, his CSW increase is being and his just success is being carried by his curveball it was at a 28% CSW last year. It's 48% this year. So a 20-point increase on the CSW of his curveball. So not getting more swinging strike once again, not getting more swinging strikes with it, just using it to get strikes and get bad contact.
And that's definitely a plan. There's a lot of guys, especially if we talk about some of the guys who primarily rely on sinkers and don't have as much velocity. They're not going to get as much called strikes and whip. They're going to pitch to contact intentionally, and they might still be effective pitchers, because they're getting ground outs. But it's not doing a lot for you, right? If they're not getting those strikeouts. All right, so let's move on to a guy who doesn't really get a lot of strikeouts until now this year. I think this is the first season where he's actually had a strikeout rate above league average. It's at 26.4%. Talking about Taijuan Walker now with the Mets. This is a guy who was a really high prospect back in the days with the Mariners. Then he went to the Diamondbacks, and he just hasn't stayed healthy. Is there something that he's kind of figured out, unlocked, that maybe is kind of boosting him to, the potential to be a fantasy relevant starter?
Yeah, like the K rate is kind of the once again going back, the K rate is kind of the key and why there's more wiggle room with him than say like someone with Boyd. Up like you said, finally above a league average strikeout rate, 26.4%. CSW up 4 points to 31%. That's still not like an excellent CSW. That's still like a very mid-range CSW. So, but opposite from Boyd, that the CSW's increase is being carried by a swing strike rate increase. It's up from 7.8% last year to 10.5% this year. But therein kind of lies the issue about whether his K rate is for real, because a 26% K rate, like you should have better than a 10.5% swing strike rate. Like, kind of a good rule of thumb, a very general rule of thumb is, double your swinging strike rate. And that's around what, a K percent you can support. So that's kind of an indicator that makes me worry that his swinging strike is still below average. Looking back, looking here at his pitch by pitch, his he's got a lot of like moderate increases, but nothing special. He's not changing anything crazy. Like I don't know. Like I don't have any Walker, like, because I just didn't believe that he was going to actually strike out people for once. So it's nice to see this increase, but I worry about whether it's going to be sustainable. And he's got the Ks, but then he's also ratios are really nice. But once again, there's some scary things in his ratios. Looking at the evaluators, he's got 2.14 ERA, excellent. But that's a 303 FIP. But as far as going forward, the predictive ones, 4.11 xFIP, 4.83 Sierra, not great. 4.9, not as predictive, but xERA, which uses Statcast and xWOBA to predict what's your ERA, should have been a 4.91 xERA. So, the ERA looks a lot of bit illusionary, and the K rate looks like it's got some smoke and mirrors to it. So I'm not real confident that this boost in CSW is going to carry Walker to continued success here.
Yeah, and this is time for a small sample alert because it is still April. We're talking most of these guys 4 or 5 starts. We want to dive in and see, what's what, any changes worth noting. But sometimes, all these numbers, at times, depending on the situation, can change in a heartbeat. So we'll see. Schedule sometimes has stuff to play. And I was looking for a guy we're not going to talk about with this, but Adbert Alzolay. He's made 3 starts this year, and they've all come against Milwaukee. Okay, so what do we know about him? Well, we know he knows how to pitch to Milwaukee. All right, that's it. I'm not going to take too much away from that just yet. So same thing with Walker. I mean, who knows? It's cold one day that he's pitching. He gets hit around, or the team he was facing had 3 guys who were out. So, anyways, take it all with a little grain of salt at this point. But let's carry on to the fallers. What goes up must come down. Start with a guy that I may or may not have called a must-have before the season. Frankie Montas, he's got good stuff, but it's not looking too good right now. He got knocked around quite a bit in his first start against the Dodgers to say, okay, let's take that for what it was. But not looked great since then. A little bit up and down, had a couple good outings, but right now a 26.8% CSW, not too good. And I think you were telling me, Nick, that he has so far one of the worst individual pitches in terms of performance in all of the big leagues, and that would be his slider.
Yeah, it's bad. I just wrote an article for Fangraphs about just looking at people who have increased the movement on their sliders, and his slider is bad. It was at the time when I wrote it, it was at looking at run value per 100 pitches. It had the worst run value among sliders at plus 7.7. I believe after last night's start, I went back and looked, and it's all the way down at plus 5.9. I think still the worst, but it improved a little bit. But he's throwing it 3 miles per hour harder. It's getting significantly less vertical movement, and is just getting smacked around. And he is, you said it's like when his stuff is working, it is dominant stuff. It is, a whole game of dominant stuff where no one can hit him because he's got the slider, the high 90s heat, and the split finger working, and no one can do anything with it. But when it's off, he's going to get hit. He's going to give up home runs. I think he gave up another 2 home runs last night. So he's got a 6.2 ERA right now. The evaluators look a little better. He's got a 5.19 FIP, so that that's better. A 4.36 xFIP and a 4.02 Sierra. So yeah, that's positive. But his K rate's down to 22%, down from 25% last year. And I just like I wrote in the article, it's down 6 points on his CSW, and like I wrote, it's like he has dominant stuff, but it's good luck figuring out when it's going to show up, because it's not like, don't make guesses based off of don't make your judgments based off opponents, because he can shut out the best offenses in baseball, and he can get lit up by the worst ones. It's highly variable, and you know, I don't have tons of him, but I have him sprinkled in here and there because I loved his draft price and just kind of the way I was drafting a lot, getting a lot of pitchers in the 130 to 190 range, and Montes would fall in a lot of places. People were worried about health, worried about his bad performance last year, and so yeah, I had a lot higher hopes for him this year.
And so far, those people who were worried would have been correct. I have, how much of him I have on my fantasy teams? Too much. That's the short line.
Too much.
But we'll see. I mean, like you said, who knows? The Sierra, is more promising. That tends to correlate pretty closely with ERA, over time. So there's hope. I will keep telling myself. All right. Now,
Yes.
a lot of people also worried about Zach Plesac. He was a top 100 pick most places. A lot of people, really bought into him as maybe frontline starter, the next Clevenger. Now that he's out in Cleveland, not so much this year. And I wonder then, what do you consider? Because you were high on him in the preseason. You think that he's just hit a couple of bumps early in the season? Are you still buying into him, or is there legit concern because he's a faller also?
Yeah, this has been a bummer. I don't have like an overload of Plesac. You know, but I have him in a few NFBC leagues, and I was very high on him this year, and so this has been kind of distressing to see. 6.2 ERA right now. The evaluators look a lot better once again. Uh, he's got. Uh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. He's got a 5.81 ERA right now, but a 4.03 FIP, a 3.84 xFIP, 3.98 Sierra. So that's all nice and shiny, but his K rate has cratered. It was 27.7% last year. It's 16.5% this year. His CSW is down by 2.6 points. His swinging strike overall is down by 3 points. It was 14% last year, which isn't like phenomenal. That's better than average. But the thing with Plesac that has what is killing him is his slider. I mean, as far as whiffs go, like as far as run value, his slider has actually still been really good. But it's actually been like exactly what it was in 2020 at minus 4.4, which is excellent for a pitch by pitch. But the whiffs have just, he had a 26% swing strike rate on his slider last year, and it is down to 16%. So, the individual CSW, he had a 37% CSW on his slider last year, the highest of any of his pitches, and it's down 11 points to 26%. So that like he doesn't have a good enough fastball to just live with that without like he was succeeding on the back of that slider and an underrated curveball in my opinion. And it is like all of his pitches are kind of down a little bit, like looking at CSW and swing strike rate, but it's that slider that is like he's got to get the whiffs back.
Yeah, and that was his bread and butter pitch. That if there's an individual pitch, I don't know offhand, but I'm guessing that as far as run values, the Plesac slider was definitely up there last year in terms of being probably one of the best pitches. So if he's not generating as many whiffs on that individual pitch, that's definitely reason for concern. But we'll see. It's again still early. Maybe they'll turn around. It's too early to really have the book's not out on him fully yet because we don't have multiple seasons of him being a full time starter. So I'd say stay patient if you did draft him, especially because you probably picked him pretty high. But not as high as Arenado, who, a lot of people think this is the year he steps up to even take the next step, be a top 5 overall starter. Not happening so far. Now, it's not a huge drop, but in terms of CSW, down 2 points. But his K rate, last year went to a career high 33.2%, and now it's kind of back to previous levels. In fact, a little bit lower, 24.8%. So I wonder what the reason is so far, because I'm one of those people. I really thought that everything would align where he would be one of those guys to kind of step up and take the mantle, as far as over from guys like Scherzer and, you know, maybe be one of those elite status starters. He's not doing badly, right? There's nothing bad. His ratios are actually really good, and his strikeout rate isn't bad. It's just it's gone down for some reason.
Yeah, like he hasn't been bad. Like, looking at auction values, like he's like the number 29 pitcher. Once again, his rankings are highly variable, but that's also through five. Look at this. That's through yesterday. So that's through five starts, which is the tied with a bunch of people for the most. So it's not like he's behind a start or anything as far as value goes. He's still number 29. Like I said, the ratios are great. He's got a 2.84 ERA, 3.08 xERA, 2.45 FIP, and xFIP and Sierra are both 3.33. Like that's excellent. It's but to get, as we keep going back to like get to that elite tier, you have to have strikeouts, and he was at 30. He had a 33% K rate last year, and it's 25. It's not quite 25% this year, over an eight point drop. CSW is only down 2 points. Swing strike has dropped a little bit, but he's got to get back to his changeup is the one that is kind of really, looking at his pitch mix, is the only one that's really went down as far as like run value goes. Everything else is in a negative, but changeups at plus 2.0, which is below average. And his CSW on his changeup has absolutely tanked. It was 31.2% last year. It's pretty good for a changeup, and it's down at 17% this year. So it's a changeup that's going to need to get back to what it was if I think we want these K's to come back.
And our own Eric Samulski does now an excellent series called The Catcher's Corner. He's been looking at pitch mix changes and pitchers who are either introducing a new pitch or kind of modifying their stuff. And he did take a look at Nola, if I'm correct, right, a couple weeks ago. Talked about how he's trying to introduce a new pitch. I think it was a cutter that's just not going too well. I mean, do you think he's tinkering too much? You maybe just should stick to what worked last year?
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. Like looking at he has really, like, this year, looking at his pitch mix last year, his four seamer was 25%. This year is 46%. Like, that's a significant change. His curveball is about the same. His changeup is down by about 4%. Like, Pittsburgh stuff is, this early in the season, like, it can be very noisy, or it is very noisy, just because a lot of it will depend on opponents. And so if you just, depending on the opponents, if you're going to attack them one way, like, your pitch mix stuff can get kind of funky. But when you see his four seam went up 20 points from 26% to 46%, like, that's not noise. That's something new. And so relying on that heavy, he introduced a cutter, but it seems he only throws at the left-handers. But it's still, looking here, it's still getting hit pretty hard, and doesn't really seem like it's working its way into his arsenal very well. So, yeah, man, stop tinkering. Like, go back to, I know that, I'm sure he's concerned about real life baseball and likes his shiny ERA and whatnot, but I wish he would think about us fantasy players and go back to the pitch mix that has 30% K potential.
If more players would just have that perspective, it would help us a lot. But
I know. It's like I don't think it's a big deal. Like,
Oh well. I mean, take it for what it's worth. But all these pitchers, and there's still some more early in the season. We keep saying that because it's true. But we have to pay attention to these things. So we'll keep looking and diving into the stats for you. Next week we'll do a different topic for pitchers, but also catch our hitter video. We do this every week, 3 up, 3 down. So been talking about CSW percent. Of course, if you haven't hit subscribe already, guys, do that for us right now. We're here every single week to help you out with fantasy baseball because that's what we do. All right. Thanks for watching.